Welcome back, Team DWC. It's your boy TWP Popcorn. Y'all know what time it is. Another night in paradise. We decided to skip drama week, because I actually had some drama this week, which spoiled my drama week mood. Yeah, you see how they work? Shouts out to the work. Hopefully this video don't stick. The last one did, but we gonna get right back to it. Right back.
That song, you should have heard the serenade we got in the break from one Mr. Don Lemon. The marijuana legalization has a long history in the United States, but on this 420, the unofficial holiday celebrating it, polls show Americans are smoking more marijuana than ever and doing it legally. Senior data reporter Harry Anton is here with this morning's number. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm to paradise.
There he is.
That's back in my day. I love the good Rick James and Tina Marie. I went to a concert once. They were so high. It was amazing.
I got to record you and play you later when I can actually do something about it. In any event, this morning's number is 30 billion U.S. legal marijuana sales in 2022. $30 billion.
Legal.
Legal. This is legal. We got, who knows what's going on in the illegal market. And that 30 billion, top chocolate's 18 billion. That's how popular and how much money is being made just from legal marijuana. And I think you get an understanding here. Marijuana is legal in 20 states plus the District of Columbia. You could see these states range right in their political preferences. You get blue states like New York, but then you get a red state like Missouri. And keep in mind, all these states have legalized marijuana since 2012. So this is really just a fresh phenomenon.
And they're making tons of money on this.
They're making a lot of money.
Because of the taxes?
And the weird thing, that's why people wanted regulation. But the weird thing, you have people sitting in jail who are selling a little bit of marijuana. Now you have people becoming billionaires of marijuana. So they got to get that straight. But is there any sign that marijuana's appeal is waning at all?
Yeah. So first off, I would point out that part of the reason why marijuana has, the legalization push has really become so entrenched in our society is because people just find it far less dangerous than they did back in 1974, right? What's more dangerous, alcohol or marijuana? Back in 74, it was basically split. But look where we are in 2022, right? Alcohol, the overwhelming plurality say it's more dangerous than marijuana. That being said, Don, as you point out, is there any sign that perhaps this push for legalization is slowing down a little bit? And I would point out that we had a bunch of referendum, ballot measures in 2022 and 2023 in some red states. And the no side won in these three states. In Oklahoma, it won with 62%, North Dakota, 55%, and South Dakota, and 53%. Of course, these are some really red states. But, I think if you walk on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, let's say you walk on a Sunday morning or a Saturday morning, sometimes that stench of marijuana just kind of hits you. At least it does for me. And
it's everywhere. No, my kids are like, what am I smelling?
Yeah. What are you smelling? And so in Dobbs Ferry, New York, which of course is a suburb of New York City, right? It's just a little bit north of here. There was a marijuana dispensary referendum just last month, and no overwhelmingly won. And this is a very, very blue village. So I do think that there's sort of this pushback of people saying, I want it legal, but I don't want to smell it everywhere.
Yeah, well, it's a stench, but some people like it. So it's an aroma for some people.
Okay, Don.
Or others.
Are you going to sing us out?
No, I'm not going to sing it out. Listen, I understand the smell. You don't have to just go to the Upper West Side of Manhattan. You can go anywhere, and you smell marijuana. You can walk outside of this building. People do it on their lunch break or their smoke breaks. It's legal.
It's become like smoking tobacco.
It's legal.
Yeah.
Mary
Thank you,
Jane.
Harry.
Ooh, Harry.
Now this.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. Read. I forgot to read. It only happens a few times a century. Stunning images of last night's rare hybrid solar eclipse. Next. Wonder how I forgot.
Mr. Nice Guy was blowing up, man. We got customers from all over New York.
No, not that.
We even stole a few from Samson.
Oh, what's up, nigga? Come on in, man. Come on, Weed, man. Thanks, baby. Get on, beat it, don't get you scared.
Yeah. So smoke a lot. What can I get you today, Smoke a Lot?
Love weed. Let me get a pound of your Swedish chiba.
Damn. Yeah, something told me to bring a lot of weed, man. Oh, shit. Pound of my Swedish Chiba. Don't get no better than that.
Smells you the bag, baby.
That's gonna be $9,600, bro.
See what I got here. Come on, man, hang out for a minute, smoke with me. I got weed, got my bong out. Come on, son.
For you, man, I'll stay for a minute, but then I gotta be going.
I understand.
Man, Smoke a Lot opened up to me like I was Barbara Walters. It was ridiculous. He told me about his lawyer,
He had sex with my mama. Why?
his spirituality,
God, if you listen, hell.
his bad back,
Doctor said I need a backiotomy.
his love life.
I'm impotent, man. Get away from me, bitch.
I mean, talk about a guy with problems.
Tough break.
I can't take it no more.
No wonder he smoked a pound a week.
Somebody want it.
So now we had a
Real
famous
nigga boy.
clientele, and
Green Eyes gonna miss you.
guess what
You
else?
call me next week about weed. About weed.
Now, this question is really about, let's see. Oh, marijuana usage, right? Now, I get this question a lot. And through the years, my answer to this question has changed. So let's talk about it in terms of what does the data show? It says, hey, doc, I'm 36 years old, and I just wanted to know, are there any studies that correlate marijuana use to stronger erections? Now, my personal experience when I partake is that me having an erection like I'm 18 again. Plus, the erection lasts very long, even after I ejaculate, so I'm able to go extra rounds without stopping. Just curious to say what the studies have to say. Now, this gentleman is in a perfect situation because he is in his prime. 36, shouldn't really be having any issues. Now, what we don't know is how this is going to play out long term. So say you're 36, maybe you've been smoking for 15 years, smoking weed for 15 years. We don't know how chronic weed use compares to casual weed use, because honestly, studies really don't look at, and this is my qualm with the studies, they're really not looking at dosage, duration, the method that they're using to consume the marijuana, or anything, or even like the strain, whether it's sativa or indica even. So with that being said, let's talk about what we do know. Now, this is a great question because you're not alone. When I ask or talk to people about marijuana usage, it tends to be across the board that people will say, yeah, it makes me feel hornier. It makes me feel a lot more like having sex. I'm having great erections. I'm getting moist, whether it's for ladies or men. And a study was actually published that showed that when men were asked to report about marijuana use, about 51% of guys said that they had increased arousal with weed use, and about a 73% increase in sexual pleasure. So that's great, right? And you can't ignore the ladies when they study ladies and ask them about THC or marijuana or cannabis, whatever you want to call it, use. Female sexual function went up. They said they increased in both orgasm and sex drive when they consumed marijuana before sex. Now, like I said, doesn't say whether they were smoking it, whether they were eating it, whether they were vaping it. But I'll say this, I honestly believe that if you are a blunt smoker, you're getting that tobacco. And so we cannot separate out the tobacco from the marijuana, right? Because tobacco, we know, will impair blood flow long term. We know that it will damage the endothelium or the lining of the blood vessels, which are important for blood flow. So it's like, okay, well, we'll go through and talk about these studies on marijuana use, but they're not specifying what type of marijuana use this is, right? And a recently published systematic review, and it was a systematic review and a meta-analysis, which basically looks at studies and finds studies that have been done really well. And they put all the data in together, and then they look at it and they pull the data out. And so recently, one was published that conducted a look at cannabis use and erectile dysfunction, because they wanted to see specifically, okay, we can talk about testosterone, we can talk about all these things, but what was it doing in terms of erectile dysfunction? And so what they did is they looked at 5 case-controlled studies with data of 3,395 healthy men. About 1,000 of them used weed, they used marijuana, and about 2,300 of them were non-users. They were all healthy guys. And I want you to keep in mind that they looked at users of marijuana and not smokers. They were just like, do you use it? Have you used it? But they didn't specify what kind. And the overall prevalence of erectile dysfunction in marijuana users was actually 69%. And ED in the non-users was about 35%. So data from this study really started to suggest that erectile dysfunction was twice as high in marijuana users compared to non-users. But, let's talk about the but here. But I'll also say that they hypothesized that the reason erectile dysfunction in marijuana users was elevated was either through 2 different pathways. One was using the cannabinoid receptors in the brain. They thought that there was something going on there. But another one is because there's cannabinoid receptors in the erectile tissue or the corpus cavernosum. So they hypothesized that it was one of those 2 pathways which was causing ED in marijuana users. So this was really the prevailing thought, is that potentially marijuana was causing ED long-term in guys, or that it was associated with it, right? But in 2021, a Canadian center published a historical cohort study from patients that they had actually seen within their clinic. Now, they looked at patients that had been coming in from 2008 to 2017. And what they did is they took almost 8,000 men, 7,809 to be exact, were included in the study. Now, out of those, almost 1,000 of them used marijuana in some way, shape, or form, and about 7,000 weren't using at all. So 993 were users of marijuana and 6,817 didn't use it. So I like to round up, right? I'm always a glass half full instead of empty type. So when they compared the gents who were in these 2 different categories as weed users versus non-weed users, what they found is that the weed users actually had a higher sex drive. They actually had a higher average total testosterone levels. And those guys who used marijuana actually seemed to feel as though they were aging better than the non-users, right? Maybe they were just mellowed out a little more. And get this, cannabis users were also saying that they were having more sex than the non-users. Now, this same study actually found something else out. Testosterone levels. They found that within their cohort, now this is in Canada, they actually do a great way of breaking down what nationality they were and what race they were and all of that, and and factoring in alcohol drinking and a whole bunch of things and lifestyle. What they also found is that the testosterone levels were higher in the cannabis users than the non-users. So popular thought has been, it had been for years, that people just assumed that if you used marijuana, you were going to lower your testosterone levels. But this study actually found the opposite. And actually, there was a study even before that, which was a large cohort study that looked at testosterone levels with cannabis use in over 1,200 men. And they too found that testosterone levels actually seemed higher and went up in marijuana users compared to the non-users. So this Canadian study that found that it seems as though marijuana might be useful when it comes to men and sex drive and erectile function is actually much larger than the previous study that seemed to say the exact opposite. So because of the size of the study and because of the fact that it seems very carefully conducted, and because it seems as though clinically men that use marijuana recreationally really do tend to have better sex and, more sex and so on and so forth, I'm going to lean towards believing this second study that came out that says that it actually has a positive impact. But I want to preface this by saying that I do not think that guys who are smoking blunts fall into this category, because the tobacco, the nicotine that you crumble in with the weed actually can negatively impact blood flow. So I do not believe that blunt smokers are having this type of improvement. I also think that we got to study it a little closer to see, what does this say about the dose? What form of marijuana consumption is this positivity associated with versus potentially having some negative impacts? So I think all of that is definitely something to keep in mind. So I'm not saying go out tomorrow and smoke weed and I think it's going to repair erectile function and give you massive erections. But what I can say is that based off of the data that we're looking at, the gentlemen who casually use marijuana seem to have a lifestyle which reflects having a more positive experience with erectile function than guys who maybe don't. Okay? So I hope that helps. Now, one thing I want to be very clear about is that when it comes to sperm function and fertility and your sperm moving around like they should and being viable and virile and able to fertilize an egg, now I will say that there's plenty of data to suggest that cannabis or marijuana use will impair your ability to get somebody pregnant. And that is pretty much across the board. Most studies seem to show that there's a little bit of damage to the sperm quality. But if you are comfortable shooting blanks, then you don't have to worry about it. You can keep using marijuana in the way that you have. But if you are in the family planning stages of life where you actually want to get your partner pregnant or someone else pregnant, then you do need to consider that long-term use of marijuana can impair sperm ability. So future studies need to really look at marijuana use by type, strain, dose, frequencies, and the different ways that people are consuming it. Are they smoking it? Are they eating it? Are they vaping it? Are they chewing it? Are they rubbing it on their body? Because that can give us more data and more information as to whether or not this is something that you should be engaged with. All right. And we want to know, is this dose dependent? Is it the more you smoke? Is it the less you smoke? Is it, we need more data. So if it's working for you, I would say don't be alarmed. But if you're doing it and it's not working for you, that'd be one of the first things that I'll tell you to stop. Like for example, take a patient of mine, chronic weed smoker, came in, was having some erectile function issues, but he was also vegan. So that was part of the problem. And there were some other things going on. His testosterone levels were low because he was vegan. And his body just wasn't making the testosterone the way that it used to. But I'll also say that one of the things that I had him do was stop smoking weed. So sometimes in my practice, I have advised someone to stop smoking weed. But like I said, if it's working for you, then I don't see any real reason to be concerned. But I'll also say this: the body loves variety. So if you've been smoking chronically, stop for a little while, then consider going back to it. Nothing nothing like that should you just be doing all day, every day for the rest of your life, right? Everything should be done with a little bit of moderation in mind. I mean, so that's my spiel on marijuana, and I hope that helps.
Everybody in New York was calling to get down with Mr. Nice Guy. We met all kinds of customers, like this guy here. He's what we call an enhancement smoker, because he thinks that marijuana makes every activity that much better.
Mi casa, su casa.
Observe.
You're Scarface, right? Yeah. I love Al Pacino, man. Did you ever see Scent of a Woman?
Yup.
Have you ever seen Scent of a Woman on weed? That's the way to see it, man. It's just whack.
$60, yo.
That's cool, man. I got it. Did you ever see the back of a $20 bill, man?
Man, I don't know, yo.
Did you ever see the back of a $20 bill on weed? Oh, there's some weird shit in there, man. There's a dude sitting in the bushes, man. Does he have a gun? I don't know, man. I don't know. What? Red team go. Red team go. It's just some weird shit, man.
Man, you fucking crazy, yo.
No, it's cool. Thanks, man. Hey, yo, wait. Dude, I'm gonna check out the stars later. It's really trippy. Especially on weed, man.
You either use the internet for fun or you use the internet to grow. You're here to grow. Welcome to TRS Clips. You mentioned ganja as something that was used. I'll tell you what, all of India smokes weed now, especially younger India. Everyone smokes weed. I'll be surprised to find a college that doesn't have some weed consumption in India. Which is why I always find it tricky to speak about weed on the show, because I've been there myself. And every time I would find the internet validating something about weed, I would be more inclined to smoking it. So that's not my intention behind asking you this. I do not wish to validate the stoners who are listening to this podcast. And in saying this, what's the purpose of marijuana in Hinduism, in spiritual growth, and in Aghora specifically?
Well, I think we should first remember that cannabis
One of my best cures.
grows all over the country. It grows wild. I spend a lot of time in Uttarakhand nowadays. It grows wild in Uttarakhand. So it is a plant. In Ayurveda, it's a very useful thing, especially for people who have whose digestive capability is disturbed in some way. Especially, like, for example, you've had parasites many times. So that it is a very good medicine if it's prepared correctly with other things added to it and consumed in the right amount.
Does it still get you high?
If you're eating it that way, usually not. But it's also something that has been traditionally used. It's been a traditional offering to Lord Shiva for a long time because he takes intoxicants. I remember, we're talking about probably almost 40 years ago, I had gone to Ujjain. Ujjain, one of the Jyotirlingas, is there, Mahakaleshwara. And so this was almost 40 years ago. Back then, there was not Jyotirlinga tourism and all the kind of stuff we have nowadays. So it was evening. There was almost no one in the temple. I walked into the temple, and there was the pujari, and he was covering the linga with a thick paste of bhang. And he was decorating it with some peanuts, some mungfali. It was very beautiful. I sat there, and then after a while of sitting there, and I was repeating a couple of things, he gave me a nice piece of bhang as prasad off the linga. So this is something that is traditional. Now, what would that bhang be meant for? That word bhang comes from the Sanskrit word bhanga. Bhanga actually means to break. What is it supposed to do? Break the connection between your awareness and your ordinary physical existence. So the point of taking bhang, for example, is to sit and meditate and allow your awareness to become the awareness of Shiva. The difference between bhang on the one hand and ganja or charas on the other hand is that bhang takes a longer time to come on, and it lasts for a lot longer time. Charas and ganja, they come on much more quickly, and the effect goes away more quickly. But charas and ganja are meant for the same thing. But it's also the case that whether you're taking any form of cannabis, the thing is that whatever is in your mind, that will continue to stay in your mind. So the only reason, and Vimalananda emphasized this repeatedly, the only reason to take these is to take them and then to sit down and meditate, to sit down and chant, to sit down and worship the fire or the water or whatever element you're worshiping. That is the only reason to take them, because otherwise they will simply get you more connected to whatever kind of thing you are addicted to.
Food or sex.
Whatever it may be, absolutely. Food or sex or sitting around and laughing at stupid YouTube videos or movies or whatever it may, anything.
This is where a lot of people get it wrong as well. You know, they only associate pot with being a spiritual thing, but then they use it as an excuse to do non-spiritual things when they're high.
An excuse is still an excuse, no matter how good or bad the excuse may be. So whatever you use it for, it's going to encourage you to keep using it for that purpose.
How often would sadhus get stoned in order to meditate? Every day?
Some sadhus smoke every day.
Is that correct?
Correct is a big word. If some sadhus, that may be part of their sadhana. They may say, every day, this is what I need to do. I am making ganja my sadhana. Some sadhus may not do that. It depends on the person. But it has to be something that you know why you're doing it deliberately. And sometimes, of course, Vimalananda would, he would also use it as a way of experimenting with, somebody comes and thinks they can do something, and he would let them try something out and see whether they could do it or not. I remember once, we used to have a friend who, I don't know what his name was. We called him China Sert. I think he was originally or part Nepali or something like that. So he looked vaguely Asian or Chinese. And he was in Sayan Koliwada. And he was regarded as being kind of a dada of some kind, of a tough guy. And he was a nice guy overall. A couple of times he had brought Vimalananda a chillum that had some kind of extra visha, a little extra poison in it. Sometimes, like people into their chillum, they will add datura. Datura, if you go to Benares, for example, you go to Vishwanath, you can buy datura seed pods and offer them to Shiva. That's very dangerous. Datura, for some people, even one seed might kill them.
Have you tried
datura? I have tried datura. I don't like it. It depends. I mean, some people use datura, but I remember asking a shaman in South America about datura. He said, yeah, it's very useful, especially for finding things that have been lost. But he said she's a very jealous plant, meaning that once you start working with her, it's very hard to escape from it.
Yeah, you read all sorts of stories about datura on the internet where they say that there's also a presence of a black dog in everyone's hallucinations. Is that true? And that's why they call it devil's weed.
That I don't know, but I do know people who have taken it, enough to really have it take over their awareness. They say that the it will look exactly like reality, except there will be some fuzziness at the edges. That's the only way you can tell it's
what
not
had
reality.
happened to you?
Well, I just took a small amount, and I didn't take it internally. I smoked it, and so I could tell. I mean, you can kill yourself with it, and people become permanently insane from it. So I could tell that it was a very poisonous thing. You have to know what. I feel good about arsenic. I didn't feel good about datura. You have to know what poisons you feel good with.
You had done this with Vimalananda?
I actually did it afterwards.
Okay. What do you?
He never used datura. He would use other things. I mean, once he gave me some snake venom that had been prepared in a particular way.
Really?
That was very interesting. That had an effect for like 24 hours. I can't even describe what it was like, but it was just very interesting. It was snake reality.
Snake reality.
Yeah, it's like you were seeing the world from the eyes of a snake. It was very unusual.
Which is what?
That's why I say I can't. I mean, it's hard to. You can if you could get into the body of a reptile and see through the eyes of the reptile, it's like you're seeing. Reptiles are not emotional things. They're just very basic reality connected to this is what I'm going to do. There's nothing about emotion. It's just very matter of fact.
Very much like an agori.
Very much like an agori. So yeah, I mean, so anyway, there was this China set, and he had brought a couple of times, not just once, a couple of times he had brought a chillum to Vimalananda that had some other kind of poison in it. I don't know what it was, but Vimalananda smoked the chillum, and China set got the effects of the poison. So I would have thought that once would have been enough to convince him, but he did that twice. After that, he realized that was not a good idea. So he would just bring, standard charas with him. So I remember, I think probably because it is my habit to self-importance is a problem that I've had my entire life. So I was probably thinking that, yes, I know how to handle this charas. So this day, whichever it was, we were going to drop China set back in Sayan Koliwada. And this was, of course, 40 years ago. And there was not the Eastern Freeway, and there was not, there was the chillum, and we all smoked it. And then Vimalananda said, okay. And we went down to his car, and then he handed me the keys and said, now you drive. So now I've just smoked this chillum with all this charas in it. And now I was driving in Bombay anyway, but now it's a bigger challenge to drive. And to, both he and China said are expecting that I'm not going to crawl down Muhammad Ali Road, but that I'm going to drive like I know what I'm doing. So now I have the pressure of them both paying attention to me and the pressure of the charas, which is, and so, it was an educational experience and a good reminder not to think too much of my capabilities. And it was a good lesson. Okay. And thank God Vimalananda was along with me, but I got there and everything was fine. And China said was duly impressed. And so that worked well.
I'm still stuck on the snake venom, so gotta understand a little bit more about it because...
Well, Vimalananda, he used to, and I know there were people who used to do this, but I never met anyone who did it except him, and he never volunteered to show me how to do it, and I'm not willing to do it otherwise. He used to get a cobra, milk out most of the venom, and then let the cobra strike him on the tongue. And so most of the effect of the venom would go directly into the brain. Obviously, that's a really dangerous thing to do, but that's something he did because he wanted to know the effect. He made it a point to try things out just to the point where he knew what the effect was. And then he said, if I do it anymore, there's too much danger that I'm going to become habituated to it. Then he would drop it and move on to the next thing. But he was always trying new things whenever there were new things to be tried.
That's a part of being an agori?
For him, that wasn't a part of being an agori. And I believe that is very much a part of being an agori because it's things that come to you. You need to know what they are. You need to know. As he put it, it's the law of the jungle. It either kills you or you kill it. Every time I used to, his favorite intoxicant was scotch. And when he would drink scotch, he would become more and more sharp and what he would talk would become more and more sophisticated and abstruse.
The reason I'm hesitant about having this free-flowing conversation with you is there's a lot of people who watch this and think that drinking scotch equals spiritual growth.
And one of the first things that happened after Agora was first published almost 40 years ago in the U.S. is somebody sent a letter to the publisher. Back then we had to use snail mail. And the letter said, please send the mantra for controlling alcohol. Do not do this unless you have someone guiding you. And that was very much his point.
I believe in Tantra of any form, when you're using intoxicants, there's a huge ritual that happens upon those intoxicants before you consume them.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Which may have an effect on your body, it may have an effect on the intoxicant.
And that's why I think I said earlier, but if not, I'm saying right now, do not go out and try this stuff. If you're meant to do it and you have the intention, someone will come to you, maybe in this lifetime and maybe not, and someone will tell you the right things to do. And that may not be what you imagine. Yeah. You may be thinking, I will start drinking scotch. And the guru will come to you and say, under no circumstances drink alcohol ever. And then what? Then your idea will no longer, you will either have to think, oh my God, but I know that I could achieve this without, but number one is you need a mentor. You need a guide. You will get lost otherwise. Many people have gotten lost. Many people are getting lost. Nowadays, for example, people are taking ayahuasca. And so many people think they have become shamans and they can distribute ayahuasca. And so many people think that they can take ayahuasca and they know what they're doing. But that doesn't mean they know what they're doing. This applies to anything that will disconnect you from your current present time reality. Only take it if you have a guide. And it has to be a legit, not just somebody who thinks they're a guide, somebody who is a real. How will you know if they're a real guide? Well, you need to be able to find that out. How will you find that out? That's a good question. That's something, there is no one pariksha, no one test you can use to figure out whether someone is legitimate. You have to be able to, or as Vimalananda used to say, suppose you want to know whether some swami or some sadhu or some yogi is legitimate. It's up to you to be able to have the perception of them. Don't expect that they are going to, because anyone will say, I have achieved this. Whether or not they've achieved that, you don't know, and possibly they don't know. But he used to say that, any fool can tell the difference between the smell of the gutter and the smell of attar. But just because you can know what is the difference between badbu and khushbu, between something that smells that is a stench and something that is a fragrance, that's all that means. After you have learned a little bit, you'll be able to tell whether that fragrance is rose or jasmine or agar or whatever it may be. Okay. But even then, if you're, just because you know it's rose, that doesn't mean you will know whether it's the highest quality of rose or whether it's rose plus rose geranium or something else. You have to have enough experience to know what that person is about before you personally can conclude that what they're saying is accurate or not.
New clips released at the same time that a podcast releases. This is TRS Clips. Make sure you subscribe.
If your life is fucked up, you need weed. Weed is put on this earth for niggas on the struggle, niggas on the grind. There is a chemical in weed that's called bucket. Had to be careful though. Had to be careful because weed is getting stronger every 2 weeks. And these niggas ain't sending out memos or bulletins or nothing. The shit just strong for no reason. And these niggas that sell the weed be happy than a motherfucker to tell you how much stronger this shit is than the last shit. Just as soon as they see you, just nigga. You remember that shit I gave you last week, nigga? It's nothing, nigga. It's nothing. It's nothing, nigga. Nigga, it's nothing. This shit right here, nigga. This shit right here, nigga. Right here. This shit, nigga. This shit here, nigga. Always have some fucked up name. It's cryptochronic, kind of like, nigga.
The last best place is probably the last place you'd expect to see this. Dispensaries and grow houses dotting Montana's stunning landscape. This is in Ruby Red, Montana, where last year 57% of voters moved to legalize recreational marijuana. To give you an idea, 2 years before, President Donald Trump received that same share in this state. Today, 22 states and the District of Columbia have legal access to cannabis. But the lack of federal legislation is leaving small dispensary owners with big problems.
This is one of the highest testing strains in Montana.
Elliot Lindsay is the owner of Bozeman-based dispensary Grizzly Pine.
We need to move past the conversation about whether or not cannabis exists or should exist and move towards a regulated industry that is normal.
Even legal cannabis businesses are anything but normal. Every week, Elliot drives hours in an unmarked van to deposit cash at one of the few banks willing to work with him. As a dispensary owner, he can't access most major financial institutions or take credit cards, since selling marijuana is still against federal law.
We have been fortunate enough to find a local credit union.
Elliot's careful not to ruin his relationship with a local bank that keeps his business compliant with the law. Is there anything else that you, as a cannabis business owner, have to deal with that other businesses don't?
Oh, man. Yeah, there's a lot that we have to deal. Yeah, there's a laundry list.
You said you had a peach card, correct?
Operating a legal dispensary is expensive, even after purchasing a license.
I don't know that there's a whole lot of consumer-based businesses where you would be required to wear a badge like this one.
Owners could face hefty fines for failing to follow strict rules amid unscheduled inspections from state authorities. Since cannabis is still a Schedule I drug, legal dispensary owners don't qualify for tax exemptions like traditional businesses. Gallatin County Sheriff Dan Springer backs federal legislation that would give marijuana businesses access to banking services.
I will say it's confusing when you have a federal statute, that creates it as a crime or doesn't clear it. And then you have state laws that are different than federal laws.
Safe banking's biggest advocates in this state say they don't support legalizing marijuana. But now that voters chose to do it, they say it's a public safety issue not to take action. That includes Montana's Republican senator, now leading the charge in